This is my big 6D Mark II review. I'm really excited to bring this to you. This is a bunch of firsts for me. This is first hands-on time with a new product in, the first couple months of its being released. This is the first time I've ever rented gear. This is the first time I've done a review of a product that I don't already own. This is the first time I've looked at a product seriously that I wasn't interested in buying. So I think this is a really exciting review to bring to y'all. And I think it's a great place to start too with the actual device. It's a fantastic camera. No camera that's been released in the last little while, no modern camera is a bad camera. It's easy in this world of YouTube reviewing, and not that I do too much of it, but I like to try my hand at it. It's easy in this world of YouTube reviewing to be really down on a camera for having, a quarter stop less dynamic range, to compare it really closely to a bunch of other devices that it may not suit up well with, just to kind of elicit a reaction. And, the 6D Mark II is kind of a unique camera in that way because it's almost more divisive than any other brand or camera on the market, because there are so many people like myself that owned the original 6D, right? And I love this camera. This camera has served me very well and very faithfully for a long time, and I really enjoy using it even still when I'm in the mood for an SLR. A lot of us were really disappointed in what the 6D Mark II came out as, and then there were a lot of people who thought it was fantastic. So let's dive into, what makes a camera a good camera or a bad camera in these next couple segments. We're going to be covering the handling, the stills performance, the video performance, the autofocus performance, when I say performance I mean like quality, the time lapse, and the user experience. Kind of as a top line piece, I think that however good the 6D Mark II is, without any direct comparisons, as a camera that's been produced in the last couple of years, it still has a number of, to me, glaring flaws. To me, the 6D Mark II just doesn't feel quite there. From the way that you manipulate the camera to the files in post, both photo and video, it's really close, but it's just not quite there. It doesn't feel to me like a serious device, a device that's worth, the money that it's priced at, even with these current reductions that we're seeing here in early 2018. Or a serious device in the sense that this could be one that you could hold on to for 3 to 5 years without really feeling the need to upgrade. The handling on the 6D Mark II, pretty decent. It is classic Canon. They got a lot of things right if you're a Canon user. But again, I think there's a lot of things that they almost got but didn't quite get there with. And quickly for the record, I had the 6D Mark II, it's not this camera anymore, for about 12 days, so I think I have a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about. But getting back to the handling, in terms of just the buttons, many of them are very jiggly. It's like they're just not seated well. In particular, the dial on the back of the camera around the multifunction pad is quite loose. The mode dial is irritatingly easy to manipulate when you're not, trying to, which is a big downer. The lens release button doesn't inspire confidence if, snug fits are a thing for you. And finally, the shutter dial is also fairly poorly seated, made out of some pretty flimsy feeling rubber material. The tilty flippy touchscreen I don't feel is that good. Although, when you punch in for manual focus, it is really sharp and crispy, and having a touchscreen is admittedly nice in a variety of situations. There is, for example, no electronic level when you're in the Face Plus tracking mode. And I felt also like, where I touched wasn't exactly accurate to where the AF point tried to lock onto. And despite having only very lightly, in terms of how I handled the camera, used this device for about 11 days, 12 days, there were several of the buttons that just stopped really responding in a reasonable time frame. From the start-stop button to the multi-directional pad, it kind of turned into a struggle. Moving on to the stills, I shot predominantly in the neutral profile, with everything at as neutral as possible when you make your own custom picture profile. I wanted to see exactly what the device was receiving, what the images would look like as straight out of camera as possible, and I also shot in RAW. The impression of the stills that I get on the computer is not stellar. I don't know the numbers exactly, but if, you know, the average camera shoots in 16-bit or 14-bit, this feels like 12 or 10-bit color depth. It just doesn't feel like it's as much color depth as you're getting on most other devices, inclusive of the original 60. By the way, do I call it the original 60, the 60, or the 60 Mark I? I'm very confused on that front. Let me know in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. In terms of resolution, 26 megapixels plus 6 megapixels is not that big of a resolution difference. Don't buy the 60 Mark II for the resolution difference between the original and the Mark II. I can barely tell a difference in resolution, and with the way that the ISO, you know, handles, it's very hard to tell, especially because there's very little detail in a lot of the images. I think that 30 megapixels and a software hobbled sensor from the 5D Mark IV, which would also push down production costs and increase profit for both that sensor and the 5D Mark IV, would have made a ton more sense. In terms of ISO performance, having played with the files quite a bit, I don't feel like the 60 Mark II handles ISO noise very well. The first several hundred images that I took on the 60 Mark II were at or above ISO 3200 on an f1.8 prime in dark interior settings, and it's very obvious that it was taken by that camera, to me, by comparison to my other two. It just isn't quite there in my opinion. The big thing is that details get obscured through noise. One of the problems that a lot of modern cameras have is that they over-apply noise reduction. I feel like that the 60 Mark II could stand to add some noise reduction while also pushing in some sharpness, but I think that what Canon's done is push sharpness in, and that's really degraded the detail quality of a lot of the ISO range. That's kind of the reality of the situation, sadly, is that the 60 Mark II clouds over most everything in noise. In my opinion, it has a ton of issues resolving detail because of that cloud of noise, but also because the AF performance isn't really where it needs to be for it being a modern camera. I think that you can make your own determination on the video quality, since many of the clips that you're probably seeing over top, or that you will be seeing over top of this video, are from the 60 Mark II. The ones that aren't marked, like of the 60 Mark II, those were taken on my Alpha 6300. However, if you do care for my opinion, the 1080p looks like 720 in my mind. That's been upsampled, upscaled, whatever. And once you turn on like the heaviest mode of stabilization, it looks closer to 480 or 360p that's just been upsampled. It's not really 1080. In terms of the 4K time-lapse, 4K time-lapse was a big selling point of, you know, the device. Canon was able to say that we have 4K now, and I really love that there's an included intervalometer. However, the 4K time-lapse to my eyes does look just only like really good 1080p, and that's because I take, on my 6300, I take a 4K image, downsample it to 1080, and use that image when I publish a ton of my videos. So I know what really good 1080 looks like, and that's what that 4K looks like. Which means that they captured a great 1080 and then upsampled it, upscaled it, whatever, to 4K. What really bothers me though about the included intervalometer is that Canon seems to think that including an intervalometer is one of the key features for turning a device into an entry-level device. I have a big issue with a full-frame camera being labeled an entry-level device. And there was also a little bit of a software issue with the intervalometer. It didn't update the time it would take and the duration it would spit out while you were making changes. It didn't update that in real time. You had to, you know, basically finalize everything and be just about ready to actually take your time lapse before it would tell you. I wish it could do that on a more live basis, and I know that that's possible. In terms of the stills AF performance through the viewfinder with the 45-point AF spread from the ADD, largely just fine, but I do have a couple gripes. First off, I don't feel like it's as reliable as the original 60. The original 60, the Mark I, whatever it is, way more reliable, 60 Mark II tends to kind of fall down. Whenever I used the full spread through the viewfinder, I kept wishing that there were more spread. I know there was a ton of griping about it and a ton of comparisons being made early on when it got announced, but I really do feel like from a user experience perspective and from a shooter's perspective, that spread really should be larger. And in terms of the actual accuracy of the stills AF performance through the viewfinder, I don't feel that it's particularly accurate. I shot a lot at f1.8 because I had to, because I was in dark interior environments, and I wasn't confident in it. I felt frequently like I was missing shots that I shouldn't have done because it just wasn't, it just wasn't right. In terms of the live view AF, the DPAF functionality that so many people are so stoked about, I was deeply underwhelmed by comparison to my Sony Alpha 6300 and in general to nearly full sensor OS PDAF spreads, on sensor phase detect autofocus point spreads. I frequently experienced in DPAF AFS whiffing, AFC whiffing. It just whiffed a ton. There would be a lot of points where I would be in AFS, I would acquire focus, I would press the button, and I would be in multi-shot, and I would keep the button down, and it would track, it would just, you know, the focus would leave entirely. It would go to minimum focus, like that. I was like, that's very strange. Additionally, when you use face plus tracking, oftentimes when you touch a point, and then that thing moves near another object that might be closer than it in the frame, the little box, when it goes over, it just decides to lock onto the nearer thing instead, which was disappointing at several occasions. And the live view performance in video was also a bit underwhelming. Most of all, it's slow, it doesn't acquire focus quickly, but also it really struggles in identifying when a face has entered the scene. Once it thinks it knows when it's in focus, it won't try to reacquire when it can tell that there is another face in the scene. So when I duck out of frame and pop back in, I'm back in focus. But on the 6D Mark II, as you're probably seeing over top of this, that's really not the case at all. And like I was saying a minute ago, it's a very slow autofocus system. Even with a stepping motor lens, on a USM lens, I've tried both, you know, it was easily outpaced, and I had it on a pretty responsive setting. With fast aperture lenses, it will miss regularly and consistently. And with large aperture primes that are longer than 50mm, it'll really struggle. In terms of the user experience, and kind of as a conclusion to this video, everything about the camera screams almost there. Not really quite arrived, and that's irritating to me personally. In my opinion, the resolution isn't a big enough bump to be worth getting that over the original 60, or the 60 Mark I. Remind me which one is the correct one in the comments. The ISO performance doesn't seem to me to be special. The video functionality is poor at best, especially for it being a modern camera. I couldn't possibly say that the AF performance is at all reliable. If you're going to have a 6D series camera to shoot something professionally, get the original. The 60 Mark I is very reliable. 60 Mark II was very unreliable. Somehow, I think that my overall conclusion is that Canon actually managed to somehow actually make an entry-level full-frame camera. Which is disappointing because full frame shouldn't be entry-level. It seems to me as if Canon lost a ton of brand equity with the 60 Mark II. Bringing a device to the table that people with T5s or T6s would really want. Crucially, they didn't bring to the table a device that people who owned a 60 would want. I think the 60 Mark II was rushed into production to put a product on a shelf at a time when they felt like they should, but they really should have spent some more time in development. But I do think that whatever that next device is, or let me rephrase, I hope that whatever that next device is a very thoughtfully developed device that will deliver in ways that the 60 Mark II has not. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Please don't hesitate to check out the affiliate links that I have, the Amazon affiliate links that I have in the description. That would mean a ton to me. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.